Welcome to our first episode of Careers in the Spotlight. I have such a treat for you today. I had a wonderful conversation with Jess from Jessica Lee Yoga. Now, Jess is a marketing and public relations expert turned yoga instructor. And after graduating with a double degree of a Bachelor of Business, specialising in public relations, and a Bachelor of Communications and Media, she's since turned the table and started using all of those wonderful skills in her own small business as she went out on her own in Jessica Lee Yoga, and you'll find a little bit more about that as we go through the interview. Now, this interview is for anyone who has thought about changing careers, anyone who has any interest in yoga as a practice or as a professional, anyone who wants to go out on their own. This is just a great interview for all of those things. It's also really great if you are interested in the whole concept of wellness to get the most out of yourself, then Jess is the person to take you through all of that as well. Now, I hope you really enjoy the interview. I really enjoyed the conversation. Without further ado, I'll get right into it. I started by asking Jess what her favorite yoga pose was and why.
I think it would have to be pigeon pose, which is it's more of a stretch than a hold, like than a strengthening. I really like it because, hey,
How do you do that? What's a pigeon?
how do you do that? Without having the visuals, it's so you're on the ground and you basically have, so to get into it, you have your hands at the front of the mat, and you bring, say it's your right knee to behind the right wrist, and then lower the lower leg down onto the ground, and you slide your back leg out directly behind you. So it's kind of like this, where you're you're getting the stretch around the glutes and everything like that, and around the hips and the back hip flexor.
Hips, that sort of flex.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that one because did you like my visuals there? I love that one because it's such a deep stretch, but I find it really useful and cathartic. So I remember specifically a time that I was traveling and I was in London. I was in the 4th week of a 4-week trip, and I hadn't done any yoga and everything like that. And I was alone in a hotel room by that stage, and I was feeling anxious and heady for some reason. Like I was very in my head about things, and I'm like, oh, if only I could do some yoga, but I don't have my mat, and like hotel room carpet slippery, like how do I do anything? I'm like, well, I can do this one. So I did pigeon pose and just breathed into it, and it's an intense stretch, absolutely, but I like that like I like that side of things. Some people hate it, but I noticed that my anxiety, as soon as I started breathing into the stretch and releasing those big thick stabilizing muscles, I noticed my anxiety just leveled out, and it just, everything smoothed out, and I was way less in my head. I was just like, oh, actually, whatever this is, whatever I thought was a big issue, or whatever I thought was the end of the world, doesn't actually, it's fine. Like, I've got this. So I really like it for that. But on a physical level, it's also one of the tightest areas in our body, just by being human. I usually give,
don't we? So if you're sitting a lot, your hips close up a bit.
Exactly. And that's usually the examples I'll give, depending on the kind of group I'm teaching. Like if you're in corporate, or if you're at a desk a lot, those muscles are tight. But also if you're walking a lot, or if you're moving a lot, or if you're exercising a lot, those muscles are tight. So it's regardless of what you do, they can get over tight, and then they can start going into that compensation thing as well. So it's important to strengthen them. But I find most people, but also most of my stress, can be at least helped and calmed in my body by doing that pose on both sides.
And that's one of the things about yoga, isn't it? Is that mind-body connection, that when you can kind of take a moment and do some of those poses and go through the motions, then it can actually slow everything down.
Yeah, I liken it to the example of, when you're in the shower and all of your best ideas come to you when you're in the
Yeah,
shower, right?
I meditate
Yeah.
in the shower every day.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I liken it to the fact that because we're in the shower, usually it's warm, and you're relaxed and you're
Mm,
just focused on the feeling of the warmth on your body, but you're not in your head as much because there's that awareness elsewhere.
yeah,
That's what yoga is like, because it brings your awareness more into your body, even in the practices where you're still the most anxious, for example. Even if it's not the smoothest practice, it's still that literally the practice of bringing your attention back into your body and noticing what's tightening up where and based on what thoughts. So I use the analogy, almost like a tagline really, as off the mat. So it's the yoga off the mat is, how do we show up on the mat, what's coming up for us when we're in a challenging stretch, for example. So pigeon pose can bring up a lot of, um, it can bring up emotions. It can bring up frustration at the teacher for making you hold the pose so long and why is she doing this. It can bring up that feeling of release, but it can bring up like various kinds of emotions within you. So how do we show up when we experience those emotions, or when we're in a challenging hold of strengthening something? How do we show up in how we hold that pose, how we still breathe through the challenge or through the intensity? And we can take those, like the things that we practice on the mat, we can take them off the mat.
yeah. So you see that
Um,
connection between how you deal with the challenges on the mat with challenging poses and new poses and all of that, to how we deal with our challenges and new challenges in life as well.
yes,
And is that
yes,
what got you
absolutely.
into yoga to begin with?
Um, Probably, I guess I've always, like, I grew up sort of doing things like dance and theater and I guess more physical theater as an element of that as well. So I always liked stretching because um, I've just always enjoyed the feeling of stretching. It's just always been something that I'm like, oh, I just love, this is what
Yeah.
feels really good. So when I got into yoga, it just started with a YouTube video that I found of
Okay.
just a couple of stretches that were called yoga, which is still yoga, like the way it was done. I think it was 20 minutes. And I would get up early every morning before work. So this is after I'd graduated uni. I would have loved to have had it during uni, but it was after
You
I'd
don't think
graduated.
about the mind-body connection at uni.
No, I don't. Not at all. But it was after I'd graduated uni and was working in corporate. So I'd get up early to do this sequence of like 20 minutes. And eventually I just didn't need the YouTube video anymore. I just sort of did that.
Yeah.
And I just started to notice physically, like, because I have tension like around my shoulder blades and everything. So I'd notice physically when I didn't do it, but I'd also notice um, in my stress levels throughout the day, because it was really quite a busy job and long hours and everything like
Yeah.
that. So it was how I handled stress or frustrations or people throughout the day.
What were you doing then, Jess?
So I was in communications. So I was in it was a not-for-profit, but it was a large organization that was national.
Yeah.
So, and I was in the marketing team there, and like in marketing, I've found in general, it's very high demand and
Yeah.
not necessarily a lot of understanding of the work that is actually done.
Yeah.
So, or required. So, and when there's different departments involved, there's lots of different people demanding a
Yeah.
lot as well. As even if they're really lovely people, there's still that, I felt that element of demand. So I noticed as far as how I handled that kind of stress, whereas if I was practicing it regularly, then I'd be like, yep, cool, like, okay. And I was able to set expectations or boundaries a lot easier and be easeful about it and be like, yep, okay, we're going to get it done, but this is a situation or whatever. It might have sometimes been like, yeah, okay, and more of that tense of like, oh,
Yeah.
yep, I'm gonna try, like, oh, and then go back to my desk and go, oh no, like, and just feel that stress in a different
Yeah.
way. So
It sounds like you were in a pretty corporate role there.
yeah.
How did you escape and become the Zen person that you are now?
It really was an escape. So, yeah, so it was kind of just that progression of gut feeling and trusting that. So that was when I was living in Brisbane, and I had the gut feeling to move up to the Sunshine Coast at that point in time. So I just followed through on that, and it all opened up and it all worked, and still working in corporate up there as well. And when I moved to the coast, I made the decision. I'm like, well, I'm struggling to make it to an actual yoga class here in Brisbane because of my hours, because of traffic at the hours that I have to travel, everything like that. So once I'm up the coast, it's going to be so much easier for me to actually go to a class rather than just this DIY stuff at home, which was still helpful, but I was ready for the next depth of it. So the studio I found was around the corner from where I live, and I was able to make it there and everything like that. So it was a couple of years that I was just going regularly. I had my 2 days a week that I made a point of, as much, like, unless there was something that came up with work, I was leaving on time because I had to go to yoga.
Yeah. So you weren't an instructor at that point. You were just going to classes and really just into the practice yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to the classes, and I was feeling a lot of anxiety in general in my life at that point. So the classes were my outlet, and I just started exploring these different methods and tools of what works for me and what I can bring that back into my corporate world, because I loved my job, but it was even more demand because I was the only person in marketing. The market, I was the marketing team. So, and it wasn't a not-for-profit either. So it was almost like that level up, that higher level of like, of demand and everything like that. So, so I was just exploring these different things that helped me, I guess, cope, and gave me the tools, and that felt right for me, and helped me feel as best as I could in my own self. Regardless of what was going on around me, but also as a coping mechanism for some specific things that were going on. Yeah. So eventually it just sort of came up. So my teacher, the teacher I was going to most often, she was one of the teacher trainers of the teacher training course. And so, which I knew, but we'd never really spoken too much about, but it eventually came up that I was just looking on the website, and I thought I'd just look up the course just to read about it. And I was probably ready to learn something because I like you know, getting my nerd on and everything like that. So, but when I read it, it was that gut feeling again of, and this was maybe a week and a half out from the course starting. It was like, oh, I really want to do this. And I remember specifically saying, it's not like I want to be a teacher or anything. I don't want to have to show up at the same time every week, which of course
I want that kind of commitment, man.
No, like, which is of course what we do when we work in our job anyway, right?
Yeah.
Funny that.
But I guess there'd also be that fear that it's like, would you still enjoy it as much if it was a job? Like, because that's the first thing, that being there on time and doing it every week, like you're making this commitment. It's no longer just to make you feel zen, but you actually have an obligation to go and do it then too.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I went in, that's exactly it. So I went into the teacher training, and it all sort of happened. So it was good. But I went to the teacher training with that mindset of, like it was open. It wasn't shut off, but it was more like, oh, I'm probably here more for just the personal development side of it rather than, you know, like,
you were thinking more about how it could improve your own practice rather than just sharing that with others.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I think there was that glimmer after day one when my teacher asked me, because she had us day one, so it was a nice little soft landing for me. So, and she asked me, she's like, how do you feel after day one? And I'm like, oh, I think I want to teach.
As soon as you get into it, this is it, this is my calling.
So it's kind of going from there, and it got to the point where after I graduated that, it was a 6-month course, but after I graduated that, realizing the contrast between how I felt when I teach and when I share this versus how I felt in my job, and the limitations that I felt, and knowing that I I felt like I had a lot more to give than what I was giving in my job. Even though I was giving as much as I could, it was just limited by that role and everything like that. So it was realizing the contrast and then getting to the point of going, oh, well, and it's a hard decision, especially when, you know, like I got along really well with my boss. Like it was all really, there was a lot of good about it, but at the same time, it was just that point where I'm like, oh, this isn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
I've
So
reached
you were sitting at home with like Sunday-itis before Mondays going, God, I hate my job, I hate my life. It wasn't
No, it was just this realization of, oh, I don't want to be spending my time doing this because I've experienced the difference of how I feel doing this.
Yeah.
And then allowing that expansion of myself rather than kind of what I would refer to as keeping myself small by just going, like, by just staying there, even if I recognized that it didn't feel as good as I could feel. It was going, okay, well, what's this leading me to?
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like your teacher that became then your teacher, that played a big role in that.
Yeah. She's one of my like best friends now. So that's been really helpful because, like, I guess as far as being a yoga teacher, she would be my mentor as a yoga teacher. So, you know, like she gets it, every sort of challenge that I've come up against over the last, you know, however long of, well, the last 2.5 years of being a teacher, but especially the last year and a half of just being a teacher, like not doing much else, but other than just being in my business, she's been the person who's been able to be like, oh, I hear you, and this is what I've found helped, and just really understanding the roller coaster of the challenge that can come with being a yoga teacher, whether you're like, there's misconceptions about who you are or what you are, and the strength to still stand in your own self and what is best for you as well, and not play into any expectations as well.
I feel like it sounds like you've trusted her a lot along this kind of journey. Do you feel like, you know how we always say you can't like teach a younger person what we already know? Has it been hard to take advice from her along the way when sometimes you're not sure about what to do?
No, actually, it's been really it's been really easy. Is that enough of an answer? It
sounds like she's really made a big impact on how you have progressed through, and it's good to have someone who has kind of already cleared the path for you to then follow through, but in your own way. So it's not always about like emulating everything that they do, but sometimes when you see someone who's doing what you would like to be doing, it takes away that fear that it's like, well, they're doing it, and if they're willing to help me and show me how I can do that too, you know, that can really change something.
And it's been really good because it has been, that's exactly how I describe it, is it has been a lot of that clearing the way, and we are very similar in like our values and our qualities and everything like that, but there's not been any competition because her own focus has grown since she started as a teacher as well. So, and she's gone into an area of still teaching that is amazing work. It's kids yoga teaching, but that's not my, which is awesome, but that's not my jam personally as far as how I want to teach, but it's still, so there's none of that weird competition of, oh, well, if I help them, it's, you know, it's just really complemented each other. It's kind of like a tree. I keep doing that shape.
A good mentor is one that can see that, you know, your success doesn't actually take away from my success. So, finding people along the way that understand that, because there is that fear that it's like, well, no, if she gets good, then can I still be good? Or what if she gets better than me? Like it's this constant comparison or competition, when really like, we can all be great together. We don't have to, there's not just one of us.
And that's exactly it. And it seems to be prevalent in the world of yoga teaching that I've noticed, that there is that risk. I mean, I guess it's anywhere, but there is that risk that you can get caught up in that sense of competition. But to me is like, she has, in this example, she has her niche and I've found my niche. So it makes it different.
See, I always
Mm.
thought that you guys would all be really zen, but there is competition there.
Yeah. It's
Unbelievable.
it's interesting. Like, or then there's sometimes like there's too zen where it's like, no, come on, just like commit to something, or do something. But yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
So I have clearly already come up with a few stereotypes and probably labeling of yoga instructors so far in our conversation. Does that happen a lot? Are there many misconceptions around what your life is like as a yoga instructor in
Yes.
small business?
Yeah, there is. There's a few different directions to go with this as well, but I'll cover them all because they're all important.
Excellent. It
Um,
was fine.
yeah, so one of the biggest ones, I guess it's one of the most obvious ones, is you're expected generally, I say this is all generalizations, but one of those misconceptions is that you're expected to be vegetarian or vegan nowadays.
Yeah.
As if you're a yoga teacher, it's generally an idea that you're a vegetarian at the very least, and that comes down to one of the qualities and values of the yoga practice is non-violence. So that's non-violence towards others, but it's also non-violence towards ourselves. So people put that into violence towards animals, understandably. But there's lots of different arguments there. It could be like, well,
Yeah.
for me to be non-violent to myself, I need to nourish my own body in the way that it's asking for, that kind of thing. So, but that's one of the major misconceptions is, and you can generally sort of check in and half expect most yoga people or yoga teachers to be meat free, or to not eat too much meat, and yeah, but that's one of those expectations that I've definitely heard of is oh, you're a yoga teacher and you eat meat. It's like, well,
And look, we've
I
hung out
do.
before, and I know that you still look after yourself, with or without.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Exactly. Yeah, so that's one of the big things, and I like
Yeah.
it's not insulting or anything like that. It's just one of those misconceptions that there's a lot more um into the reason why or why not, that I feel like someone would have that kind of diet, that kind of thing, and I respect it all. So that's one of those things. But as a small business owner who teaches yoga, I've had and it's not so much a misconception, but I think it's just a lack of knowing or a lack of understanding from people close to me or friends who have just been like, oh yeah, so like, are you teaching heaps of classes? And I'll say like, well, I teach this time, this time, this time, but I've just been really like busy, or my time's been full, and they'll, and at least some of them actually ask the question of like, oh, so what do you actually do with the rest of your time?
What? If you're not in
We
yoga class, I don't understand.
Yeah, exactly. Like, maybe it's the idea that we might be sitting on a beach drinking our green smoothies, or having our herbal teas
Yeah,
and
yeah.
being all zen-like, or meditating all day.
Exactly.
Yeah. um, but I think the piece that might be missing there in that understanding is it is still a business.
Yeah.
So there is the elements of running a business and building a business, if that's what you want to do, which is what I want to do.
Yeah, so
So
you don't work anywhere else, do you? So for a while there, you were doing both and doing the yoga instructing at the same time as your corporate gig. And then
yes,
through that transition of the huge dive to say, okay, well, no more corporate, and I'm just going to
yep.
focus all my attention on your business. And I know we've spoken briefly before from one of your Friday motivational posts about having a plan A and a plan B. And sometimes if you've got the corporate gig and your side gig and you're trying to spread yourself enough, it can be exhausting to do that long term. So
Yeah.
you eventually took that priority and took the dive into doing it. And what does your time look like now that you've done your corporate gig on the side?
Well, I think as far as that transition goes, it's doing it in a way that supports you as much as you need to be supported, like, you know, because if you throw yourself into something, into the void, and then you can sort of really tighten up, and then it fails because you're so stressed. So I had a bit of that transition, but and I still do like a little bit of more like contracting work, of consulting with admin or PR, like to kind of supplement that as things build for me. So there's that. But mainly my time is spent really a lot lately has been spent, there's the teaching and there's the building of those classes, or the building of those communities that I teach. And then it's a lot of connecting. It's a lot of creation for me as well, which feels really fun. And I have to watch myself and make sure I'm not just creating stuff for the sake of creating as well, as far as the business goes. But
that's your gig. That was your gig before this, and now
yeah,
that's where your other skill sets lie, and you've got this passion over here. I can see how those two could really just explode all the time.
Yeah, but it feels really good. And I really feel like everything I studied at uni and all of my, so it was media and communication and public relations that I studied. And then I worked in marketing, communications, PR. So like all of those skills that I got from that experience are serving me now.
Yeah.
But I don't have the creative freedom because I get to decide myself.
Winning.
Yeah, but basically it's a lot of website work. Websites are never done. They're never done.
Yeah.
They're always being tweaked. And I knew that from my work before, but I really know that now, because it's almost like, okay, I need to be okay enough with this, but then come back to it. Like I'm sort of re-adding a whole brand new page today, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of sort of that admin kind of, or back office work. There's
and I notice you do a lot of supplementary materials for your students off the mat, so that after the class, you know, you have a lot of content out there, from your website to your Facebook page to the podcast that you've been doing, you know, content out there.
Yes, that as well. So I have the YouTube videos, which are just shorter flows that give an idea of how I teach, and just give something more to sort of have in the in-between times, or stuff that I'm exploring in my own practice. It's kind of fun to be like, yeah, like this is what I'm doing. So like, oh, look, this is the kind of practice that can address this kind of thing. So
well, that's how you started this whole thing, was watching someone else's
exactly.
video. Like, so it's like you're just bringing it all back around.
Yeah, I'm just giving back in the way that's led. Yeah, exactly. So there's the creation of them, which means filming them and then doing the voiceover, and then the process of uploading to YouTube, and that whole fun thing. And then there is the podcast, so it's recording and editing, because I do all the I don't know if I should admit this, because it's not top quality, but like I do all the production for it, like the editing and the everything like that. So so there's the podcast, there's all of the content, there's all the like the stuff on Facebook. So all of the social media posts have a lot of messaging behind them. They're not just random. I like to make sure that there's substance.
Yeah.
If anyone's willing to
that I saw as well.
What's that, sorry?
I saw you have your own community on there as well that you...
Yeah, exactly. So I have the public stuff, but I've also created the Facebook group, just to bring more of that community, and to give a little bit extra to those who want a little bit extra, who want to be a part of that community. So it's all that community building. I've been doing Facebook Lives, both in the group as the Friday tip that you mentioned, just to have that weekly check-in and go, hey, this is what I've been exploring this week. This is how you can bring it in. Let me know what you think. And also just the public stuff, to really go into depth about some concepts that you can bring things off the mat, and ways of experiencing our lives that have a little bit more added mindfulness into them, which is how I teach anyway. So there's all of that, and then there's networking and connecting and events, and building connections to bring all of that in as well. So
like you're busy. So in all of that, what is your favorite part about your role now at Jessica Lee Yoga?
I feel like the more I get to dive deep into more of the substance, rather, like, because I love teaching groups and I love teaching and it feels really good, but the more I get to do the specialized sort of so I work with PTSD and trauma and high stress sort of related conditions and everything like that. So the more I get to do workshops that really support that side of things or specific things like that, that I get a lot of fulfillment out of that, because I get to see that result and that benefit to those people. So I really love that part. But the more I get to share about the substance, even if it's not in a class, as we were saying, online, because I do a bit of online work as well, as far as programs and things like that. The more I get to share into that off the mat well-being and everything like that, that's really landing with me as what feels really fun to explore and creative in the different ways we can explore it, and understanding and hearing how that is explored by other people as well, and what they hear in one of my Facebook lives, for example, what other people hear in what I've been saying versus the place I was coming from. So it's like, oh, so that's what you heard in that. So I really love that deeper exploration of the well-being on an overall level. So.
And you definitely come across like a natural when you share all of that stuff. Like it's been really good to be able to watch it with you. Like it's been really good.
Oh, thank you very much.
So then if they're your favourite parts, what's your least favourite part about your Jessica Lee Yoga now?
A lot of it, like, this is going to come as no surprise to anyone who has met me. A lot of it is just the part, like, bookkeeping. It's just not like, I can understand it, you know, and I know the importance of it and everything like that. Like, I can understand it. I can bring myself to a place where I understand it, but it's never been something that I've wanted to spend my time and energy and focus on understanding. So
you're not pumped at the end of the month when you close every month out or anything like that? That's not, doesn't drive you.
No, not at all. I guess I feel good because I feel organized and everything like that. But when it gets to the sort of the understandings of taxation and things like that as a small business owner, again, I can understand it, and I definitely have some really good resources around me. Like my dad is bookkeeper; he's very intelligent in that way. And
that's what I was going to ask. Like, do you have people to support you through that part?
I call him.
It's not so fun.
Yeah.
Necessarily an area that you're thoroughly researched on if it's not something that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, I just get the information I need, and I'm really lucky because he in particular is very patient, and often if it's the information that I need it right then for whatever reason, and that's what puts me in that stress state. So I get to practice my own off the mat stuff in those moments where I'm like, okay, but I'm really lucky.
How am I dealing with it?
Yeah, exactly. Am I breathing? And I'm really lucky because he's very patient when I'm in those states, and then, like, you know, he's really good, and then I'll message afterwards and be like, thanks. So that's not my favorite part, or yeah, I think because it's not too creative, and I really just love the feeling and freedom of being creative.
Yeah.
So
yeah, creative accounting can sometimes be really frowned upon.
yeah, exactly. It doesn't work. So
is there anything about your role now that you didn't expect to come up? So when you did move into Jessica Lee Yoga, is there a part of your role now that you really weren't prepared for, or anything like that?
Nothing's immediately coming to mind. Like, I'm sure there is a bit, but I knew that it would be a lot of time and effort and energy and sacrifice, like any business that's just starting out, that kind of thing. But like most of the time it's it is a labor of love. So like there is that determination that's driving me to make it work. And in that video you're talking about that I did, it was about being all in. And that's how I feel that I've approached this business is I am all in. I don't have a plan B. I'm doing things as smart and wisely as I can. I'm not being I'm not being stupid about things. I'm being really as smart as I can about the decisions I make and how I approach it. But I knew that it would require determination to get through it. And so even for those things that haven't felt as good, you know, like the stress with money that can come up because you're a small business owner and, you know, that kind of thing.
You don't get that regular paycheck every week.
No, nor do you get sick pay or holiday pay. So, you know, none of that's been unexpected though. So I hadn't gone in blindly. But that's from the business owner perspective, but the yoga teacher perspective, I guess, like I can't, nothing's really coming up as what I didn't expect. I mean, there's new things all the time and there's that growth, but it's not ever been jarring in the way of, oh, I really didn't expect that. It's just been like, oh, okay, well, I think it's mindset going into it as well. It's like, okay, well, how can I, you know, what's limiting me in my mindset about this particular piece of it, and how can I work through that so that way it doesn't limit me anymore. But I've always approached things in life like that anyway. So and
I guess this is one of the advantages of you transitioning into Jessica Lee, rather than just waking up one day going, that's it, I'm quitting my job and dropping everything straight into it. So you had some time to get used to it and really weigh up some of those risks. When you said you weren't doing anything stupid, it's really just been about you know, weighing up doing that due diligence and weighing up those risks before you do make that next choice. So you have been along the way.
That's exactly it. And I think for me, it was also a lot of getting myself mentally and emotionally in the position to run with it when it did happen. Because when it did kind of happen, it wasn't exactly when I was planning. Like I was in the process of transitioning. I'd gone from that full-time job that I moved to the coast for to a different part-time job, but which I didn't love. So that was good that it ended the way it did, but it wasn't to plan at all. And it was sooner than I expected. But that was just that catalyst of going, oh, I'm in it now. But it was getting a lot of that transition was getting myself into the position of being ready mentally and emotionally enough, because, you know, like there's always things to work through, but it's getting myself ready enough that I could be ready to run with it and have an idea of my niche, have an idea of how I wanted to do business, where my ethics were, how to move forward, that kind of thing, rather than just being at that fresh startup state right away and then having to figure it all out without the other job.
Yeah, well, those early days are so driven on excitement and adrenaline.
Yeah.
Both of those things wear out and you still have to keep going after that.
Yeah, well, a lot of it was stubbornness. It's like, I'm not going back to anything like that. Like, I'm not doing that anymore. So I've been given this opportunity. I'm all in. And again, like I said, doing a bit of like the consulting and contracting work on the side where I needed to support. But it's like, that's one of those smart decisions, but it is really a lot of that. I'm all in and I'm making this work and I'm supporting myself as much as I need to along the way, but I'm making this work. So yeah.
So do you have any advice for people who may be really enjoying their yoga practice and contemplating going to the other side of the mat?
It really is don't feel like you need to rush it. It's embrace the growth and do the teacher training. So to teach, you need to have the minimum is the 200-hour yoga teacher training qualification. So you need to have that to get your insurances, everything like that, for all the compliance reasons. So
you get kind of a certification out of that?
Yeah. So you get a certification and you want it to be registered with Yoga Alliance or Yoga Australia in Australia. So Yoga Alliance is an international body. Yoga Australia is like the Australian sort of body, and they certify the teacher training programs.
Okay.
So because otherwise that means that people like me who don't have like a studio or a school, or that I don't have a program that I've gone to this certification body and said, oh, can you look over this, make sure that that's enough to be quality for all of that. I could just tell people like, oh yeah, I'm running teacher training, but it doesn't really, like, even if I may have the skills to do that, it doesn't actually have the credibility that you need. So it's like any RTO, that kind of thing. So so you do the course, because the course is a really good growth thing anyway. But don't rush the transition. Don't be afraid of it, but don't feel like you need to throw it all in. That was the best advice I got, because I remember saying pretty early on, going, oh yeah, I do want to leave my job. But that's the part of me that likes, once I've made a decision, it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready.
That's all in mind there. You're like, I've done it now, that's it.
Yeah. So that was the best advice I got, even though I wasn't necessarily planning on it. It was a really good reminder of, don't rush it, because the stress that we can put ourselves under in that transition can take away from the enjoyment and from the flow of creativity that can come from something that you're creating that is of excellent service to the world. It can take away from that if we're under too much stress and not taking care of ourselves, because we have to be able to practice what we preach.
Excellent. So
Yeah.
to be a yoga instructor, the key things that you would need would be that minimum of that 200-hour certification. And then do you get your own insurances with that? Is that automatically registered with those industry bodies, or do you have to go out and do that?
No, so you don't actually, at this stage, the industry is fairly under legislated, but that's the minimum. But you don't actually have to register as a teacher with those bodies. It's recommended that you do, but you don't have to. The school that you learn from should be, though.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then you get your insurance separately. So it's just like finding an insurance place or a broker, and just it's public liability and professional indemnity.
And would you need that if you were working in other people's, so if you were working in someone else's studio rather than going out and being your own boss, would you need those things then as well?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So you need them regardless. And usually it's to even hire halls, like council halls, you need minimum $20 million public liability insurance anyway. But yeah, you need the minimum of 10 million for that, as well as the professional indemnity to teach, because that affects their insurances, the studio owners' insurances, or the gym owners, or whoever you're teaching for. So that's all part of positioning yourself with credibility as well, because you want to show up and do the right thing, and exactly what you said, the due diligence. It's important to me. It's important that it's there. It's ethical. It's the right thing. So yeah.
Well, the other thing I thought about too is what are the work hours like? Because if most people still kind of work that 9 to 5 slog that we do, does that mean that you are mostly working outside of those hours when it comes to classes and that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So when I was still working full time, the classes I was teaching were, and I was lucky, I had a little bit of flexi hours, where not majorly, but a little bit, where I could start a little bit early and finish a little bit early.
Oh
yeah. So I was teaching like a 5:30 weeknight class, and 6 a.m. that finished at 7 a.m., which gave me just enough time to go home and make breakfast and then get changed and head off to work. If I had a shower before class, because that was a slow flow anyway, so I wasn't getting sweaty and gross. So, so yeah, I was doing early mornings, and the nighttime classes or the weekend classes. So, which was like Saturday morning, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And are there many classes that actually happen during the day?
Not too many. There's some that are usually like after school drop-off time. So it's usually about 9 to 9:15 or 9:30 time slot, which is really good to have there anyway. Or there's also like nowadays I teach a 4 p.m. class as well, and because some people will finish, they'll like school teachers or things like that, they'll come along to that. So there's not too many that are during the day unless they're for specific groups, like so for corporates that I'll do like it's a lunchtime thing or a, you know, like a special breakaway session. But or if it's a group that works shift work. So
okay.
Yeah, so some police groups that I've done workshops with, our first workshop was 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, which because they're on shift work, so that's the time that, you know, they sort of pick that kind of thing. So it really depends on your audience and your demographic and your group. But as far as general studio and gym classes go, it'll be those outside of normal full-time hour time slots.
It certainly sounds like you need to be flexible to be able to work with the clientele that you're choosing to work with.
I
mean, if you need to go shopping, you can do it in the middle of the day while everyone else is at work.
You know what? That's actually been like the best thing ever. It'll get to a Saturday and I'm like, oh, well, I'm not going to go shopping today. I'm just going to wait till Monday. So
yeah, I would too. I remember what that was like when I was at uni. Oh, weekday time off is amazing.
Yes, it's so good. Traffic is much better. Everything just goes much smoother. So yeah,
maybe that's why you're so zen.
Yeah, maybe we don't deal with all the other stuff. So so it's good. But as far as like the work hours, as I said, outside of the teaching, you kind of as a business owner, you kind of get to choose that. So I remember when I first stepped away from full-time work, I'd be working like 14 hours between teaching and on the computer doing things. I'd be working 14 hours a day, but I'd go down at lunchtime to the beach for 20 minutes just because I needed to get away from the house entirely. And I remember the perception that a lot of people had, like the misconception that a lot of people had was like, oh, you're living the life. And like, wait a sec, like, you know, this is 20 minutes of my day and this isn't every day either. So
sometimes we only share on social media those really good 20 minutes though, because no one really wants to hear about the rest.
Which is what I was doing. Yeah, I'm like, oh look, but I think it was amazement in my for myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world out here. So I'm like, oh, have you seen this world out here, guys? Like on Facebook. So that was where it came from.
So you were rubbing it in. That was really
well, not on purpose. It was more because I was like, have you guys seen this? Oh my God, I didn't remember that this existed.
I'm so glad that we got to spend some time together today, and thank you for volunteering your time, because
my pleasure.
Busy. I see the content that you put out there and it's incredible. It's definitely worth having a look at some of Jessica's stuff, and I'll give you all of the links to her website, her Facebook page, everything, so that you can have a look around. There's a course, Jess has a course on her website as well that you can then do in your own time. So if you're not local to where Jess is in North Brisbane and on the Sunshine Coast, then the course is well worth it. And Jess has definitely been one of the people that I've turned to as a little bit of a mentor when I started Find Your Path, because, you know, taking the leap is a bit scary, and no matter what, whether you're qualified in the content and enjoy and are passionate about the content, sometimes moving into that unknown space can be daunting. And, you know, seeing how happy it has made you, Jess, and, you know, all of our conversations, that you always do seem so like, it's all right, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, like I have my moments for sure, but I have my tribe around me as well. Like whether it's people like you that I can go to for a laugh and, you know, that kind of thing, or like the people like my mentor and things like that, that can kind of just remind me and tell me what they see from the outside, because you can't see the forest for the trees sometimes. So like it's good to have those people that are supportive, and also watch who you do tell what to as well, because some people will project their own fears onto you as well. So it really is building up that tribe of support around you, even if it's just literal moral support and just you know that you can message and go, this, and then they just send you something back and you're like, thank you. Okay. Thanks for that reminder.
Yeah.
So it's definitely helpful to have that as well.
Wisdom, and I'm sure we could probably talk all day. But it is Saturday, and I know you have other things to do. Obviously not shopping or doing things that involve where the rest of us who work 9 to 5 are getting out and about.
Yep, that's true. I usually hide in the house on the weekends. I'm like, I'm not going to the beach either.
Oh, yeah, because then everyone's at the beach. It's no longer just your beach.
It's not my beach. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and we will talk again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kathy.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jess as much as I did. I just feel like there are so many learnings from that conversation. 3 key things that I wanted to highlight from that conversation, though, are number 1, that body and mind connection, it's a real thing, and we always need to look after ourselves if we want to perform our best. It doesn't really matter what the career is, what we're doing. You always have to put your own oxygen mask on before you put an oxygen mask on someone else. So I really, truly believe that is a really important concept that we need to all remember during our very busy lives. Number 2 was that having a mentor can help. It sounded like Jess's teacher really helped encourage her to take that first step to do the teaching course. And it wasn't until she did that course that she thought, I could really do this. So sometimes having that person that believes in you, that has seen your work and has maybe been there before, they can be really helpful in your journey into the future. The third learning is about having the right support network, especially for those things that may not be your strengths. So Jess says she uses her dad a lot when it comes to the bookkeeping and finance side of things. Know what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and make sure that you have the right people around you that complement all of those things. Now, I know there are 1,000 more learnings that really came from that video, and I hope you really get the time to take it all in. I can't wait to bring you the next episode. Keep watching our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, our website, and get all the latest updates, and we'll see you soon.
It's important to believe in what you're doing and believe in the bigger picture, and because that's what fuels the determination for me, is like, I believe in what I'm doing and I feel so good in the creative process that it's worth it. Yeah. Because I also know, and I wish I'd brought this part in, but I also know, like, that it's not forever. It's just for now.